My dear students, as you remember, I have started discussing some theories of psycholinguistics, which are very important for discussions. So here, a paradigm shift. We are going to talk about a new perspective on language learning. All right. Jean Piaget. He was a Swiss psychologist, and he was famous for his four stages of cognitive development. All right, for children, and his actually thoughts and concepts, including the development of language as well. All right. However, if you look in detail, children do not think like adults, and so before they can begin to develop language, they must first actively construct their own understanding of the world through their own interaction with the environment. This is very, very important indeed. You must look at this thought here that children, they are not they do not think like adults. They have their own world. They try to develop their own world through their own perceptions, and when they come actually in contact with the environment, so they look actually at the world from the perspective of the environment. When they come into interaction with the environment, so that actually base their interactions, and thus such understanding emerges. So a child has to understand a concept before he or she can acquire the particular language which expresses it. So, any concept that a child expresses, that comes through his own perceptual understanding first. For example, there is example here. A child first becomes aware of a concept, all right, like such as relative size, okay, and only afterward do they acquire the words and patterns to convey that concept. And then after understanding any concept in language, and then the child tries to convey that very concept in that very word actually through his own way. Essentially, it is impossible for a young child to voice concepts that are unknown to them, and therefore once a child learns about their environment, then they can map language onto their prior experiences. So obviously, unknown concepts, especially during the early years, are very hard for the children to understand. But their understanding, that depends only on the environment, environmental exposure, and which makes them actually to, just to voice their experiences based on the environmental exposure. An infant's experience of a cat is that it meows, right? It meows, and obviously the cat is furry, and it eats from a bowl in the kitchen. So hence they develop the concept of cat first, all right, and then learns to make the word kitty. So you see here, the infant's experience of a cat is that it meows. This sound, this meow sound is just produced. It's a furry animal, all right, and it eats actually from a bowl in the kitchen. So they actually develop the concept of cat first, and then they learn actually to map the word kitty. So based upon the experiences of this world and even the actual animal, then such a word kitty is just comes into being, and thus it becomes that concept of the child. Language is only one of the many human mental, right, or cognitive activities, all right. And many cognitivists means those who are expert of cognitivism or cognitive activities, all right. They believe, remember, this is very, very important point, that language emerges within the context of other general cognitive abilities, okay, like this cognitive mental means this cognitive ability means which belongs to the mind, or the mental capacity of the student. all right, emerges within the context of general cognitive abilities like memory, attention, all right, and problem solving. These these are all cognitive activities, and actually, language is like one of them because it is a part of their broader intellectual development. So even if you see that language is also the broader part of intellectual development, so therefore we should look at that with these cognitive development like memory, attention, and problem solving, so even the overall broader intellectual development is actually linked to all these things like memory, attention, and problem solving. However, according to good luck, once language does emerge, it is usually within certain stages, and children go through these stages. All right. So when the language starts emerging, so there are certain stages through which this language development goes through. All right, and in a very fixed order. I mean, that is universal in all children. Uh, I mean, the development of language of children, they go through certain stages in a very, very fixed order. Like, I mean, the elements of language, they develop in a very predictable and a very fixed order in children, and which is universal. There is a consistent order of mastery of most common function, morphemes, and a language, and simple idea are expressed earlier than more complex one. Like you can say that, for example, is you have been told that when you look at telegraphic phase, so there are certain elements are dropped and only the key, the key tones remain. So therefore, you must remember this thing that the mastery of the most common morphemes and certain language, they come before the others. And similar is the idea that actually simple ideas are expressed earlier uh, um, than more complex one, and if they are grammatically complicated. I mean, complicated ideas, they actually come later. So Piaget's cognitive theory states, now you have to look at this. This is actually of immense importance for you people, dear students. You have to look that Piaget's cognitive theory states, it tells the children's language reflects the development of their logical thinking and reasoning skills in stages. All right. He says that actually the development of their logical thinking means that how are they logical, to what extent they are logical, and their reasoning stages they are shown, with each period having a specific name and age reference. Obviously, each period is divided according to the age, and there are four stages of Piaget's cognitive development theory, each involving a different aspect of language acquisition. Remember that each stage is related and concerned with a different period of language acquisition. All right. The first one, you must remember the Piaget four stages, out of which the first one, that is actually sensory motor period. All right, sensory motor period, which starts from birth till 2 years. It remains. Okay, this period. So what exactly do children do there? The children, they are born with action schemas. Okay, they are already having some action schemas. Schemas mean that behind the mind you have some thoughts, are to assimilate information about the world, and they also try to assimilate the information about the world, such as like sucking, all right, or grasping. Okay, they have already actually schemas, action schemas. They have already some schemes there in their mind. So then they try to assimilate. Assimilate means to make them similar. All right. And during the sensory motor period, children language is ego, and you must remember that the children egocentro language during this sensory motor period, during this sensory motor period, that is egocentric, and they talk either for themselves or for the pleasure of associating anyone who happens to be there with the activity of the movement. Well, what this egocentric mean? That they think actually from their own perspective. They think of they think of things of the world from their own perspective. They try to look the things from their own perspective, and they do not try to come out actually from this egocentrism right at this stage. All right, whatever concept they have in their mind, they try to apply the same concept on the things of the world. So therefore, you must remember that egocentric means from personal perspective. Second period, which is very important, and now you see the development there. Pre-operational period. Okay, pre-operational period. This pre-operational period, it starts actually from 2 years and it remains till 7. So children's language makes rapid progress, and the children, their language progresses, and the development of their mental schema. All right, their mental schema leads them quickly. Right, so at the back of the mind, they have got actually the schema, and that also helps them to accommodate new words actually and situations. They actually accommodate themselves, to the new words and new situations there. All right, so the pre-operational period, in this all this happen. Children language becomes symbolic, means symbolic. All right, they do not actually look at the physical world really, but they symbolically refers to things, allowing them to talk beyond here, like here and now. For example, they even start thinking about things which are physically beyond. All right, from the physical context, right? Rather, they symbolically talk and think of, and they use language, and they talk to things such as the past, and the future, and even their feelings. So at this stage, right, at pre-operational period, which starts from 2 to 7, so the children over there, they even talk about things which do not actually physically exist. It did very in his physical context, but rather the children, they talk about things from beyond. All right, so like they can talk about things symbolically, about past, future, and feeling, their feeling. And now we move on to egocentrism. All right, egocentrism involves animism. You must look at that as well. The third stage in this Piaget's fourth stages, that is animism. And animism, which refers to young children's tendency to consider everything, remember, including inanimate means lifeless things. All right, is being alive. So this tendency, goes in them, and even this egocentrism involve the animism in children, and they think everything to be alive. All right, and language is considered egocentric because they see things purely from their own perspective, and similarly they think such things from their own personal purely from their own personal perspective. So this egocentrism is going down there. And then we move on to operational period. All right, it's a very, very important and developed period in language acquisitions. Look, this in this theory, operational periods, which starts from 7 and it remains till 11 to 12. So 11 years to adulthood. Okay, Piaget divides this period further into two parts: the period of concrete operations, right? He actually uses this period into concrete operation, and the period of formal operations. Okay, concrete operations and formal operations, right? So language is this stage reveals the movement of their thinking from, remember, this is very, very important, from immature thinking to mature thinking, their movement starts, and from illogical to logical. Like till this period, things which they thought illogical, but right at this stage, they start from immature to mature thinking, and they start to think, to differentiate between logical and illogical things. All right, they are also able to decenter. All right, decenter is very, very important. They start to to decenter at this stage, or view things from the perspective of other than their own. Now they do not actually they do not look at the world, at the things from their own perspective, but rather they start accepting, they start accepting, I mean, looking at things from other perspective as well. All right, it is at this point the children language becomes socialized, and include things such as, all right, Chomsky adheres to a nativist approach in that he believes that certain skills are abilities. Remember, certain skill or abilities are hardwired into the brain at birth. Certain skill and abilities, the children are born with certain skill and abilities from the birth. You see, therefore, he argues that humans are born with certain cognitive abilities that enable them to learn and acquire certain. I mean, there are certain cognitive abilities inside the human mind which enable them to learn and acquire certain skills. All right. So, for example, children demonstrate a facility for acquiring spoken language, but acquire intense training to learn and read and write. Now, you see there. For example, you see the children, they demonstrate a facility for acquiring spoken language very faster, but but similarly to acquire other skills like reading and writing, they need very intense training. You understand? So therefore, certain cognitive abilities are given to children right from the very beginning, and further, nativism enables the child to grow exponentially once spoken language has been realized at a significant level. So after the spoken language has been attained, you see, at a significant level, then with that the other skill start coming as well. Thus, without cognition, full understanding and realization of mental processes is impossible. So thus we can say that without cognition, understanding and realization of mental processes is impossible. So perception is influenced, remember, by emotion. All right, we can say that perception is influenced by emotion and cultural background as well. If you are be there in a culturally rich background, so it may also help you there. What appear one way to one individual will vary greatly to the next. Yes, there might be some individual differences basically in learning, but so far the universal and the fixed things in language acquisition and content, they are the same, with irrespective of the environment is rich or poor. So they are the same. Cognitive psychology differs actually from psychological approaches in two key ways. It accepts, remember, the use of scientific method. All right, this cognitive psychology, and generally rejects introspections is a valid method for investigation. Personal introspections fail here in a cognitive psychology. Rather, it requires some experience or some experiment or some proof on which it bases its claim. And contrast with such approaches is Freudian psychology. All right, so mostly and Freudian psychology, it comes in contrast with them. Additionally, it explicitly acknowledges the existence of internal mental states such as belief, all right, desire, okay, idea, knowledge, and motivation. All right, so understandably, many scientists and researchers argue that the empirical nature of cognitive psychology is at war with the immeasurable mental states of cognitive thought. So obviously, cognitive psychology believes in experiments and proof. So which is really, it's a constant war actually with the measurable states of cognitive thought, because sometimes you cannot prove everything. I mean, through, because sometimes the thoughts and the thought processing actually in mental makeup, they cannot be seen or can be felt. So obviously, the cognitive psychology mostly it war with such type of thoughts. However, given the very functioning of the brain in relation to higher thinking, it is natural progression from empiricism to cognition. So I mean, there is actually a natural progression from empiricism to cognition. So I think initially this is enough for the time being here. I'll move on to the next topic there. All right. Thank you very much.